I've been struggling to record this chapter of my Alan Wake series, partially because I'm changing offices, and partially because it feels a little too personal to me. For all of the frustrating combat mechanics and awkward writing at points in this game, for all of the violence done to and by Alan in the course of this story, it's this brief scene on Diver's Isle which I personally find the most upsetting. I suppose it's related to the participatory nature of games, and how being compelled to be cruel to Alice reminds me of times when I have failed as a partner, a teacher, even a person in general. Maybe it's because I've felt like a little bit of an outsider my whole life, continually struggling to find a balance between being overly verbose, awkwardly avoidant, and unintentionally blunt anytime I try to express my deepest emotions or opinions. And there's no way to get around it. Alan is cruel to Alice in this part of the game, and no matter how we navigate the scene or explore the optional content, the narrative will always drive Alan to a dark place that we can do nothing to change. The impact of Alan's creative struggles go far beyond his marriage, but being compelled to play out a scene like this does unsettle me on a personal level. Alan and Alice arrive on Diver's Isle as the setting sun paints a sheen of gold over the surface of the black waters of Cauldron Lake. The remastered edition on PlayStation is one of the most beautiful moments I have seen in a video game, even a decade after its re-release. We also get a glimmer of this mutually supportive nature in Alan and Alice's relationship, as he promises to turn the lights on and get her inside before dark. Alan may be an angsty writer who snarls as he comes out of a nightmare, but he also genuinely cares for his wife, and she cares for him and needs him. Alice's phobia of the dark was hinted at in the closing shot of the previous scene. When Alan settled into the car after visiting the Oh Dear Diner, and Alice showed him the flashlight that she had bought along with their gas and groceries. She needs this flashlight nearby because she has an intense fear of the dark. This fear both tightens her relationship with Alan and is one of the most understated but horrifying aspects of Alan Wake. It's a terrifying thing to be afraid of the darkness, especially when you live in it, or it lives in you. Alice is a photographer. Her art is all about the careful control and capture of light, as much as her husband's art is about delving into the dark side of human nature and exploring it through characters he conjures from that darkness. As the first victim of Alan's nightmare, Alice will be trapped in the darkness for so very long. Crossing the bridge onto Diver's Isle, our arrival is heralded by an unkindness of ravens. An appropriate metaphor, perhaps, seeing as it is an act of intended kindness, and Alan's wildly disproportionate response to mistaking this kindness for a conspiracy to see him committed to a mental institution that is the inciting event for the darkness which will be drawn over these characters for the remainder of the story. The cabin itself is shrouded in darkness, and if you dare to explore by flashlight, Alan finds a photo of a man in a diver's suit standing outside the cabin. He is also assaulted by a flashback to his nightmare and a vision of the woman in black that he met at the Oh Dear Diner. The only way to get power to the cabin is our next encounter with that button-tapping rhythm game, this time slightly more restrictive than the one that activated the jukebox. I really appreciate the cantankerous nature of the rusted old generator, especially the goofy way that it rattles and shakes and sputters to life. The experiential coherence of having to press X in a rhythm that really feels like coaxing an old motor to life with a pull cord is exactly what I enjoy in a QuickTime event. Once we've got the power turned back on, Alice immediately goes inside and players have the option of exploring outside for a while before joining her. We can walk all the way up to the car and get an overlook of the island and the lake. We can see Cauldron Lake Lodge in the distance, and Alan will reflect briefly on it no longer being open to the public if we press the appropriate button while studying the lodge from a promontory. The initials TZ and BJ are carved into a heart on a stump near the cabin, suggesting that this place may have been important to another couple whose names we have seen before. This may also feel like a narratively appropriate time to walk down to the dock while listening to the radio on the back porch, especially since hearing the kindly words of Pat Maine and the chipper excitement of Rose talking about Alan's arrival in Bright Falls gives maybe some further cause for his discontent. Standing at the end of the dock, Alan will comment on the exceptional darkness of the water. When we enter the cabin once the lights have been turned on, it's easier to appreciate the detail put into the faded paint on an old rocking horse and the shoebox packed with books by none other than Thomas Zane. Upon finding these books, Alan comments that he has never heard of Thomas Zane and doesn't seem to recall either the poster from his dream or the rantings of Thor and Doden Anderson. But like the initials carved into the dead tree outside, this is an important piece of foreshadowing for the twisted story which is about to begin. As a gameplay note, this cutscene will play immediately upon entering the writing room if the power is on, so if you want to see the photo of Thomas Zane as the diver on the shelf in the writing room, it is necessary to explore the cabin before turning on the generator. This is when Alan snaps. He sees the typewriter that Alice has set up for him and hears her say the name of Dr. Hartman and immediately jumps to the irrational conclusion that Alice is trying to have him committed. No matter how Alice tries to explain that she's trying to help him, he won't listen. All he can think about is the Anderson brothers and the pressure that he's been under from everyone to produce another novel. I've wanted to write my whole life. To make my living telling stories and helping others to explore them as deeply as I like to. That's part of why I've started making these video essays, because they help me to explore my gaming experiences and exercise my writing in a variety of ways that help me personally. Alan Wake is a game that speaks to me in part because I identify so much with a character who is an author struggling to compose both his stories and himself. He can have all of the characters and settings and plots and conflicts in his mind, but when it comes down to it, he is unable to put them down on paper. He can know rationally that Alice is trying to support him and give him a path back to the work that he used to love. But in this moment, he is unable to see the gift that his wife is offering. That is a struggle even the best of us faced at times. And neither Alan nor I are paragons of virtue when it comes to containing our creative angst. Alan storms out of the cabin then, pushing past Alice and leaving her alone as the lights flicker. I feel a twist in my gut every time I play through this scene. I feel compassion for Alice as she tries to help a husband whose mind has become so trapped in negative patterns that he cannot appreciate the help she is offering. And I also feel Alan's pain at having his hopes for a escape from the pressures of his career dashed by what feels like a betrayal, another reminder of his failures. I personally don't want to play a more active role in this scene, not only because it would make an already painful storyline harder to experience, but because there's a synergy in Alan losing control of himself as much as we, the players, have lost control of him for this cutscene. With the dark water all around him and the golden light of day faded to darkness, he has crossed a bridge that he'll never be able to return from. He regrets it immediately, as so many of us do when we say or do things which we can never take back. It's only then, after the damage has been done, that we gain control of Alan again. Just as the lights go out for the final time, and Alice screams in terror. It doesn't matter what words of regret are already tumbling from Alan's lips. Nothing we do can change what has happened when we lost control. Though the remainder of the game will be an attempt to rewrite the world, to defy that bitter fact. Racing back to the cabin, we are confronted for the first time with birds as enemies rather than mere set dressing. Flocks of ravens swoop down from the sky and attack Alan as he tries to make it back to Alice, who is not merely shouting in terror because Alan has left her alone in the dark, but is also telling someone to stay away. No matter how fast we dodge the birds and rush to get back into the cabin, Alan will always be too late. Alice will always scream as she falls into the water. Alan will always rush forward to the broken railing of the back porch and dive into the black waters of Cauldron Lake to try and rescue her. But it's too late. The conflict has begun. The darkness will swallow everything Alan loves, and there is nothing he can do to change the past. The only hope that remains as Alan plunges into the darkness is that he may, perhaps, be able to rewrite their future. A hope that we can all share. Thank you for joining me for this episode of my series on Alan Wake Remastered from Remedy Entertainment. This series will continue to dive into both full episodes of Alan Wake and detailed examinations of scenes and characters. If you enjoy this sort of deep dive into the themes and characters of video games, please take a moment to like and subscribe and maybe share this with everybody you know who might appreciate it. It really helps, and it's really appreciated to know that other people love these stories as much as I do.